In a world where every village has Wi-Fi and every pocket carries a smartphone, there's still a place untouched by time. A forgotten island, hidden deep in the Indian Ocean, where the people live as hunters and gatherers, just like their ancestors did 70,000 years ago. No electricity, no internet, no roads, no wheels. A place so dangerous, even helicopters fear to land. And anyone who tries to visit is met with a hail of arrows. They are the Sentinelese, the most isolated humans on Earth. But their story is even stranger than their isolation. Their very DNA holds secrets that could rewrite the human journey itself. Who are they? How did they survive untouched while civilizations rose and fell around them? And why did the Indian government ban all contact, making this the world's most forbidden island? Today, we step closer to the mystery, but not too close, because some secrets were never meant to be disturbed. The Sentinelese are not just isolated, they are the last truly uncontacted people on Earth. This indigenous group is living in North Sentinel Island, the part of Indian Andaman and Nicobar Island situated in the Bay of Bengal. They are believed to be descendants of first humans who migrated out of Africa nearly 50,000 years ago. Their population is so small that they range from 30 to 150 people only. They are unfamiliar to farming. They survive on hunting animals, fruits, and most of the time fishing. In 21st century, they are living the life that people lived tens of thousands of years ago. This place is a wonder in its own. But the main question, how is that even possible? What factors resulted in this extreme isolation for so long that they remain untouched by the outer world? The story begins about 70,000 years ago. These early people traveled along coastal routes, following the shorelines of the Arabian Peninsula, through India, Southeast Asia, and eventually to Australia. This was known as the Southern Dispersal Route, as some groups split off during this journey and settled in what are now the Andaman Islands. The ancestors of the Sentinelese likely arrived during this time. After the Ice Age, rising sea levels swallowed the land bridges, turning North Sentinel into a natural fortress, surrounded by deadly coral reefs, rough seas, and thick jungles. A place where no outsider could land without risking their life. Today, those deadly coral reefs, rough waters, and dense jungles still defend the island better than any wall ever could. But survival isn't just about food or shelter, it's about psychology. Now, one more interesting aspect that triggers scientists for years is about their dark psychology. Long-term isolation might promote tight-knit group bonding, with strong cultural cohesion and synchronized decision-making. Their hostility toward outsiders could be an evolved or culturally reinforced defensive adaptation, helping them avoid contamination or conquest. But it resulted in major historical events and several debates among anthropology groups. Now here comes the juiciest aspect of their story. They had their first encounter in 1771. British surveyor John Ritchie noted lights from North Sentinel Island while aboard the Diligent. No landing was attempted, just observations from a distance. Already the island was considered inhabited and unfriendly. Years later, in 1867, the Indian merchant ship Nineveh was wrecked on the island's reef. About 106 survivors reached shore but were attacked by the Sentinelese with arrows. British colonial forces rescued them days later, but only after a violent confrontation. In 1880, Maurice Vidal Portman, a British naval officer, landed with a large team. They captured a Sentinelese elderly couple and 4 children, taking them to Port Blair, capital of the Andamans. The main reason behind this abduction was to modernize them and introducing them to the outer world. But this didn't go well as expected. The adults died quickly of disease, and the traumatized children were returned to the island with gifts. This resulted in deep mistrust with outsiders, which would later lead to their violent encounters. During 1960s to 1990s, post-independence, India made occasional friendly contact attempts, leaving coconuts, metal tools, or plastic toys on the beach. Some tribespeople were seen watching but didn't approach. In a few cases, non-violent exchanges happened at a distance. But still, the Sentinelese never invited sustained contact. Their body language always implied, "stay away." Centuries passed. Technology conquered the oceans, but North Sentinel remained defiant. But the island's lethal reputation wasn't just ancient history. In 2006, the world would be reminded. The Sentinelese still defended their shores without mercy. 2 Indian fishermen illegally fishing near the island drifted ashore while asleep in their boat. They were killed by the Sentinelese, and their bodies were buried in shallow graves on the beach. Indian helicopters were sent to retrieve the bodies, but were driven off by arrows. And the most major event happened in the year 2018 that made things very clear. An American missionary, John Allen Chow, attempted to illegally contact the Sentinelese to convert them to Christianity. Despite warnings from locals and Indian law, he paid fishermen to bring him near the island. He was killed by arrows shortly after landing. His body was never recovered. This event played a significant role in the Sentinelese history, a global media event that reignited debates around indigenous rights, missionary ethics, and sovereignty. And after it was this incident that Indian government took them seriously. The Indian government has made North Sentinel Island off-limits, enforced by armed patrols and surveillance. No tourism, no research, no media. The law now recognizes they have the right to be left alone. But cutting them off didn't pose away every threat they have. Their isolation shields them from the world, but also leaves them dangerously vulnerable. Despite strict laws, poachers, missionaries, and curious thrill seekers occasionally violate the protected zone. These intrusions could lead to deadly disease outbreaks. Even something as common as a cold or flu could devastate the population. The 1880 contact and the 1991 brief gift exchanges prove that even well-meaning contact is dangerous. The most peaceful act can still carry fatal consequences. North Sentinel lies near rich marine zones, and illegal fishermen sometimes risk the restricted waters for profit. In 2006, 2 such fishermen were killed after drifting onto the island. A stark reminder that trespass still happens. These incidents bring unintended exposure, trash, noise, and pollutants. In conclusion, they live off the sea, and the sea is getting more crowded and dangerous. In the last 2 decades, satellite imagery and drone footage have offered glimpses into the island from above. While not physically invasive, these technologies violate their privacy and could guide future intruders. Detailed mapping and public interest might lead to tourism curiosity or media-driven stunts. As a result, the island once disappeared into the mist. Now it's on Google Earth. As a low-lying coral island, North Sentinel is extremely vulnerable to rising seas, coastal erosion, coral bleaching, which impacts their reef-based fishing, cyclones, and changing weather patterns. These effects could eventually push the Sentinelese off the island, or shrink it so much it's no longer viable. No doubt, they've survived 60,000 years of change, but this time, the world is changing too fast. The Andaman Islands are under Indian administration, and strategic interest in the Bay of Bengal is growing. Military installations, shipping lanes, and economic zones. If ever there were a geopolitical conflict, North Sentinel's status could be challenged, especially by those who don't respect indigenous rights. A shift in government, policy, or global priorities could sweep their protections away overnight. But behind their bows and secrecy, a deeper story waits, written not in language but in DNA. Yet despite all this, the true marvel of the Sentinelese lies not just in their isolation, but in their extraordinary genetics. But before diving into their DNA, we must understand how they survived so long in such extreme isolation. Isolation was not their choice. It was their fate, and they accepted it with great integrity and agility. It's perhaps the most poetic and profound chapter in the story of the Sentinelese. They survived by avoiding the world entirely, and if they weren't isolated, they may not be living today. Most indigenous groups have suffered cultural loss through intermarriage, disease, and colonization. The Sentinelese, in contrast, have no known genetic admixture from outsiders, possibly the most isolated gene pool on Earth. Their language, customs, and DNA remain uniquely their own, unaltered by outside influence. They are a living relic of early human evolution, preserving traits long vanished elsewhere. They relied on hunting, fishing, and gathering. No agriculture, no livestock, no overexploitation. They harvest wild pigs, seafood, fruit, honey, and other island resources. Their population size stays low, likely 50 to 150, which helps maintain balance with the ecosystem. It would be safe to say that they are a self-sufficient micro-civilization with no need for imports, currency, or modern tech. While most indigenous peoples were devastated by European diseases, war, slavery, and deforestation, the Sentinelese avoided all of it. They've also dodged modern crises: addiction, poverty, pollution, social alienation. So in summary, their isolation has made them healthier in some ways, though fragile in others. The Sentinelese don't just hide, They actively defend their territory. Outsiders who approach are met with arrows, spears, and clear hostility. In 2006 and 2018, intruders were killed almost instantly, sending a clear message to the outside world, which was, "Leave us alone." It's this profound isolation that made their genes among the most mysterious on Earth. What makes their genetics distinct with other groups, and what is their true lineage? Let's dive deep into it. Even though we have no direct DNA from them, researchers can still make educated inferences based on what we know from related groups, geography, and migration history. The Onge, Jarawa, and Great Andamanese. These tribes are genetically similar and can provide clues. After careful study of related tribes, scientists have uncovered clues about their ancient genetic legacy. They carry haplogroups, genetic markers, found in ancient Eurasian populations, but distinct from modern South or East Asians. They likely preserve pristine mitochondrial DNA and Y-DNA lineages that have disappeared elsewhere. Moreover, they resisted colonization, slavery, disease, and cultural destruction that hit other indigenous groups worldwide. In theory, if we could analyze their genome, we might find traces of archaic DNA, like Denisovan or unknown hominin admixture, unique immune system adaptations from living in a tropical island environment, clues about ancient human cognition, metabolism, and adaptation. They might represent a genetic fossil, like looking directly into the DNA of Ice Age humans, untouched by the last 10,000 years of civilization. But we may never know, and that's okay, because the Sentinelese have made it clear, some things are not meant to be touched. These people lived isolated for hundreds and thousands of years, and in these years, the world changed a lot. World faced new diseases, viruses, and deadly pollens, but people living in the world grew stronger immune systems that can fight these circumstances. Unfortunately, this case is not for Sentinelese, and the reason, of course, is isolation. Any type of contact could result in risk introducing deadly diseases to them that can wipe out their whole population, violate their autonomy, and potentially destroy their culture, and can also spark ethical and international outrage. Even though we cannot study them directly, but we are still able to find some of their evolutionary and biological adaptations. The Sentinelese are described as being short and small-framed, typically averaging around 5 feet, 150 centimeters tall. This is likely due to insular dwarfism, a common evolutionary trend on isolated islands with limited resources. But why does this happen? Smaller bodies require fewer calories, which is advantageous where food is seasonal or scarce. This trend is also seen in other island species, like dwarf elephants or Homo floresiensis, the hobbit human species from Indonesia. Like their Onge and Jarawa neighbors, the Sentinelese have very dark skin, likely due to long-term adaptation to the high UV exposure in the tropics. Melanin protects against sunburn, skin cancer, and folate breakdown, which is essential for reproduction and DNA repair. Accounts from the 20th century suggest the Sentinelese are incredibly fast, agile, and alert, with exceptional reflexes. These traits would be naturally selected in a population that must hunt, evade danger, and defend territory constantly. Their ability to hit moving boats with arrows or spot intruders from the forest indicates superior visual tracking and hand-eye coordination. They use handcrafted bows, spears, and fishing tools, likely adapted over millennia to match their unique ecosystem. Long-term physical labor, climbing trees, fishing, building, may lead to robust upper body musculature, like other hunter-gatherers. But the most important aspect comes in light when it's about their immunity. Now, as described earlier, they've never been exposed to modern diseases. The Sentinelese are presumed to lack immunity to things like flu, measles, or even the common cold. But they may have strong natural defenses against tropical infections, parasites, and insect-borne diseases like malaria. Genetic adaptations for detoxifying certain plant compounds or processing local seafood. We don't know for sure, but their long-term survival in a tropical isolated island suggests strong natural selection for resilience. The Sentinelese are barefoot and travel easily through dense forest and over coral reefs. This may result in toughened soles, specialized gait, and enhanced balance and body awareness. In a world obsessed with discovery, the Sentinelese force us to confront a harder truth. Some mysteries are sacred, while the Sentinelese people are genetically priceless in terms of what they could tell us. They are also human beings with the right to autonomy, privacy, and dignity. If their genome could ever be sequenced with full consent, it might reveal secrets locked away since the Ice Age. forgotten immune defenses, lost human traits, even ancient migrations. To sequence their genome, scientists would need physical contact to collect blood, saliva, or hair samples. Consent, which is currently impossible, as they do not speak outside languages or participate in global systems. International legal and ethical clearance, highly unlikely under current protections. In short, genetic study would require violating their isolation and consent. The core ethical dilemma raises the following questions. Can we learn valuable things from their DNA? Can we do so without harming or exploiting them? Should scientific benefit override their autonomy? And why taking genetic material from them would be wrong right now? Well, the Sentinelese cannot consent in any meaningful way. To collect their DNA without permission would be biopiracy, the modern equivalent of grave robbing or forced experimentation. On the more sensitive aspect, there's a dark history of indigenous DNA being patented by pharmaceutical companies, studied without sharing benefits, or used to fuel myths of purity or superiority. But if scientific curiosity must exist, it should follow 5 key principles. Do no harm, respect autonomy, preserve culture, avoid exploitation, and the last, but most important, seek consent, or step away. But besides all of the aspects, there still a question remains. Do we have the right to know everything? At the edge of the known world, they teach us a lesson we desperately need to hear. Just because we can learn something doesn't mean we should. The Sentinelese are a mirror to our values. They remind us that the right to remain unstudied is as sacred as the right to know.